So Courtney, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Marilyn. I'll start by introducing myself and telling you all a little bit about me. I am the owner of Cloverleaf Wealth Strategies. We are an independent fiduciary financial services firm. Because of my, well, she's not so little anymore. This is a picture of my Lily with Woody when she got Woody in second grade. She is just graduated high school. Maybe I need to update my pictures. But she's the one that made me a special needs mom. She is on the autism spectrum, and I really kind of learned over the years when I left kind of the corporate and banking side of financial services to start my own firm, that there were not a lot of people in my field that really knew how to help families like ours. So that really became the mission for Cloverleaf Wealth Strategies. And now about 48% of our clients are connected to the disability community in some way. And I don't claim to know it all. I learn something new every day, but it is my passion to help families and to help them figure out the best way forward for themselves and for their child or adult child. So I will go ahead on there we go. Legal disclaimer: I am not an attorney and I am not an accountant, although we do talk about those topics and they intermingle. Always make sure you speak with an attorney and an accountant. I do have ones that I recommend that are unique to our industry. So not just any attorney can do a special needs trust well. So if you need attorney recommendations, please let me know. So a lot of what I do comes down to financial planning in or futures planning in some way. And for me, the visual of how I think about financial planning or planning for our future is a mountain, right? And Mount Everest is the epitome of that. But planning for the ascent and the descent for us, that point at the top being the point at work, the point at which work becomes optional or retirement, and the descent. But for us, we're planning that for not just ourselves, but our children. And many of the decisions we make about our retirement and our future are going to have some impact specifically around Social Security on our children and their financials. So it's all very intertwined. And for me, I always tell people, if you've read the book Thin Air, I think they made a movie out of it now too, you'll learn that more people perish on the descent than on the ascent, because so much energy is put into planning how do we get to this point that they don't adequately plan for the difficulties that they may face coming back down the mountain. And for us, those are even more challenging if we're supporting not just ourselves and our spouse, but also potentially an adult child. So there's lots of kind of pitfalls or cliffs that we need to be planning for on that descent as well. I look at financial planning, disability planning, tax planning, and estate planning, all really in that same, wheelhouse, and making sure we're adequately planning for all four areas is very important. And the one thing that I always tell families is make sure you put your air mask on first. And when we get on a flight, if we're paying attention to the security protocols, as the flight attendants stand there, they always say, if masks fall, put yours on so that you can be secure enough, healthy enough, breathing well enough to assist the children and other people around you. And the same is really true about your advanced planning, your financial planning, your estate planning, your tax planning, your disability planning. All of that is extremely important, that you are in a good place so that you can best help your child. And so that's kind of how we, work through this process, or how I work through it with families. The special needs planning or disability planning really begins with the estate and special needs trust construction, figuring out first the best lawyer to work with, who are you comfortable with, who do you want to work with, then what kind of trust you need, and getting them built and established. And the next part of that is analysis of the government programs, timing, and benefits. And that's a lot of what we're going to discuss today, specifically around social security, right? And as we do the parents' financial plan, we look at the estate planning, we look at the government programs, and then that all feeds into the adult child's budget. And really kind of learning how much we're subsidizing, or what would need to be subsidized if we were not there. And so that way we can come up with an idea in conjunction with the parents' plan, how much we need to fund a special needs trust. And, that comes down to income and expenses that your child is going to have. And the primary source of their income could be Social Security. So looking at that is extremely important. Income and expenses are the two pieces to the puzzle when trying to determine what we need to do for our child's special needs trust. So that's why we're going to focus some time today in discussing Social Security and how that might play into our planning strategies. Also, depending upon the age of your child, guardianship, conservatorship, supported decision-making, all of that decision, is very, very personal, very unique to every single family, how they need to move forward, and should be done, of course, in conjunction with that attorney that you're working with. So like I said, when we're talking about the Social Security programs, or our child's income, and I realize a lot of our kids are not kids anymore, but to me, even if they're 35, 40, they're still our kids. So sorry if I'm offending anybody by saying kids and they're adults, but I think you know what I mean. So looking at, we kind of lump Social Security together in kind of, oh, I get SSI or I get SSDI. But really kind of understanding what those different programs are, and sorry, I hit the button, and how they relate together so that you can speak knowledgeably about the situation. So we're going to talk about supplemental Social Security disability income, and the disabled adult child benefit. Those are actually three very different programs at Social Security, and what their effects are on health insurance, right? Because a lot of our kids are dependent upon Medicaid and Medicare for their health coverage. So we're going to talk about how that's all connected too. So let's start first with Social Security supplemental income, SSI. So it's a federal program that provides aid to financially elderly, blind, or disabled persons. It is a needs-based program. So they are going to look at your assets as well as your income. Okay, your income, or really call it resources. And also whether or not you can work, right? So if you must be unable to work for at least 12 months. Now, if a child is disabled and the parents do not have adequate income and resources, they may qualify to get SSI at an earlier age. But most of us look at getting SSI when our child becomes 18, because then our income and resources are no longer applicable. So when a child turns 18, we want to apply for Supplemental Social Security Income, SSI. You need to apply at 18 and 1 month. I know Tia at the trust tried, she tested if you could do it at 18 months and you couldn't. She was always curious if it would go through. And she told me that a couple seminars ago. It kind of made me chuckle, but 18 and 1 month is when you want to apply. And when you do that, it's going to talk about the assets and resources. A couple things to keep in mind is that your support of your child could be counted as in-kind support or unearned income and reduce their benefits. So we want to make sure we really kind of cover all of our bases there, and we are just counting their actually earned or unearned income and their resources. The house that you live in, the primary living home, is not considered an asset. Neither is the first car. So there are some things that are considered resources that we can consider exempt. A special needs trust is exempt. I just recently had somebody say that their Social Security worker was saying that no, that counts as an asset. And, we're like, no, you have to push back on that. She's wrong. It is an exempt asset. It doesn't mean if they ask what trusts are there, you can still list it on your Medicaid or Social Security, but it is exempt. Put a little star by it, remind them this is a special needs trust, supplemental needs trust. It is not considered a resource or an asset. So be very careful with that. Amounts vary by location. Northern Virginia is $914 a month. And that can be reduced if there's income or support in any kind. The second type of program is Social Security disability income. And here the person must meet the definition of disability by Social Security. So Social Security has to, oh my gosh, look, Social Security is actually calling me right now. Go figure.
That's too funny.
That is too funny. I applied for my daughters and we were supposed to have an appointment today and I rescheduled it. So I'm wondering now why they're calling me.
Well, and it's a bummer you can't answer it because honestly, if you don't get them when they call, it's hard. So
yeah, I know. But we'll deal with that another day, right? So, but what I was saying with Social Security, you have to meet their definition of disabled. And I do have it on the screen, but it's the inability to engage in any work because of physical or mental impairment. The physical or mental impairment must have lasted for at least a continuous period of 12 months or be expected to result in death. This is called the duration requirement. Remember, the Social Security programs only cover total disability. They don't pay partial or short-term disability. To qualify for Social Security disability, you must have 4 quarters of work. Now, there is a scale that, and when I send out my these slides to you, you'll see in the notes that for younger people, they can qualify for SSI if they've worked less. It kind of is based off of your age. If you're, 33 years old, you need to have so many quarters. If you're 20 years old, you have to have so many quarters. So they do account for that. But in most cases, the work history is not very sufficient unless, unless someone became disabled, later in life. So most of my clients who say I receive disability are actually receiving the adult disabled child, and we're going to talk about that next. But the earnings threshold for disability is $1,350. That is how much you can earn per month without eliminating your disability income. Now, Social Security does have many wonderful return to work programs or incentives to be able to save for a class you need to take or a certification you need. There's lots of other ways of return to work programs that Social Security offers. So that $1,350 cannot be a hard and fast depending upon circumstances. But like I said, most of us, we say SSDI because it's a disability benefit, but it is not really. If you're talking to somebody in Social Security and you say my child receives SSDI, they're going to think that it's on that child's work history. What most of our children receive that we call disability is actually the adult disabled child benefit. Here, they must meet the definition of disability by Social Security before the age of 22. So having documented history of diagnosis and all of that is great, especially if you don't apply for SSI at 18, which I highly recommend that you do. You need to be able to prove that this disability existed prior to the age of 22. Like I said, it is based on the parent's work history. So once the parent has their 40 quarters, which, most of us that are in our 40s and 50s, we have that kind of work history, then they're claiming benefits under our amount based off of our earnings history. So if the parent's full retirement benefit is $3,000, the child would receive 50% of this. This kicks in when the parent begins claiming Social Security. So when I am 62 and I retire and I'm starting to receive my benefit, my child can then receive 50% of my full retirement benefit amount. Okay. Now they can't get it at 60. It has to be once I'm claiming Social Security, which we'll discuss. Then that plays into the parents' retirement plan as to when they start claiming Social Security and how that is, the overall money that's coming into the household for support and everything. So
Cortney, can you repeat that one more time? Because that's the critical thing. Is when is it when the parent starts claiming Social Security, or is it at their retirement age?
So depending upon the year you're born, you will have a full retirement benefit age of between 65 and 67.
Right.
So for me at age 46, my full retirement age is age 67. Okay. Yep. I can start collecting Social Security as early as 62.
Yes.
I get a reduced amount, but I can start claiming at 62. Once I start claiming, my child can receive 50% of my full retirement benefit amount.
Okay, so even if you start pulling yours at 62 at a reduced rate, they would be eligible starting when you turn 62, or when you apply for benefits, they would be eligible for half of your full retirement?
That is what David Melhorn at Social Security has said. Yes.
Okay. That's what I
do have one family that is fighting that because they're receiving 50% of the reduced amount. And Social Security has told me that no, it's based off of the full retirement amount. But your Social Security statement, you can pull it from ssa.gov. And it tells you what your benefit is right now, right? And then, of course, 50% of that is what your child would receive. Once you pass, your child receives 75%. So those numbers are important, feeding into the child's future plan. So having that. Also keep in mind that Social Security looks at your last 10-year work history. Typically for most of us, unless you start kind of, scaling back at work, our last 10 years are our highest earnings. So that Social Security amount could be growing between now and when you actually retire. Okay. So the 50% of the parent's full retirement benefit amount is what the child would receive as the adult disabled child benefit. Another thing to look at is it starts the 2-year clock at that point for Medicare. So once you start claiming, your child can start receiving, and it has 2 years until they can become dual enrolled in Medicare and Medicaid, which is fabulous because that's going to cover all of their health needs. One thing that you have to be very careful of is SSI, or the disabled adult benefit, or the disability benefit. So DAC or SSDI reduce Social Security supplemental income. So as you earn more under the adult disabled child benefit, that 914 starts shrinking. If you receive Medicaid as an automatic qualification when you enroll in SSI, it could eliminate that Medicaid coverage. Now, there's multiple ways to apply for Medicaid, and also part of the Return to Work program has a provision to stay enrolled in Medicaid. But you want to make sure you don't do anything, and you work very closely with your case managers, speak with people at Social Security, that that you don't disqualify them for Medicaid by taking the disabled adult child benefit, right? And we're going to talk a little bit more about that on some future screens. So strategies, when to apply. Like I said, 18 in 1 month, unless you're in a situation where you do not have the income and resources as a family, then you can apply under the age of 18. The next strategy is really, when should parents begin claiming, right? And there's a lot of different strategies in there. Like I said, taking the reduced amount at 62, because then your child's going to receive an increased payment. So that may be worth it overall for the household for you to start taking earlier. Also, there's a spousal component that can help as well. If one parent maybe stayed at home or had reduced income because they only worked part-time and their Social Security is not very high, they're going to have the option that they can take their amount, as long as they've been married for 10 years, or that of their spouse or ex-spouse, as long as it was a 10-year marriage. And it doesn't reduce the spouse's benefit at all. So a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to ask my ex-husband because he's going to get mad if his is reduced. His will not be reduced, or hers will not be reduced, whichever way the situation goes. So, I have a family right now who the mother started claiming at 62 because she was staying at home with the child anyway. And when dad started claiming, she then went to 50% of his amount, which was higher or just about the same as her full retirement age at 67. So we want to look at the strategies there of maximizing not just mom and dad's Social Security, but the family as a whole, especially if the child is going to be living with you for most of that retirement and their adulthood. So how can we maximize those payments. And then what do we do with it, right? I did on the previous screen, how will this impact health insurance coverage? So getting SSDI or the disabled adult child benefit helps Medicare kick in, which is great. Especially if the child's going to fall off our personal insurance at age 26, then we still have that we still have that. Social Security's calling me again. I'm so sorry. It's such a distraction. We still have that that kind of dual coverage, right? Medicaid and Medicare, or Medicaid and our personal insurance. So there, we definitely want to take advantage of that. Also be cautious if we're in a situation where we could be eliminating that Medicaid. So we want to be careful there. But before I go off this one topic here, we're going to talk a little bit later about ways to, not just once we're maximizing it, right? What do we do with that, and what is the best way to potentially help our child in the future? And, we don't want to just, get the extra money and necessarily just spend it down so it's not considered a resource. But what are some strategies we can utilize that are going to be good in the long term? So as we're talking about maximizing benefits received, adequately reporting our resources. So like I said before, your home and your first car are not considered assets. So if your child has a car that they use to get them to their part-time job, or that's not considered an asset. Burial plots and plans where you have prepaid for burial, that is not considered an asset. Cash value life insurance in the child's name is considered an asset. We don't want to do that. Retirement accounts, unfortunately, are considered an asset. So making sure we're adequately reporting, and I talked, list a special needs trust if you have it. They could request to see a copy of the trust to make sure it's in compliance with SSI or SSDI or the disabled child. They're all the same requirements, but and we'll talk a little bit about why that's important, but making sure you list everything is important. A lodging agreement between you and your child is a primary way of making sure that you are not supporting them by giving them room and board. If you do that, it will decrease your SSI by 1/3. We don't want to do that. So you have to have a lodging agreement where your child pays a competitive amount back to you each month to pay for room and board. Or they will take that 1/3 out. So have a lodging agreement that states that they will pay you $500 a month. And every month when that SSI payment or SSDI or disabled adult child, whatever benefit hits their account, it needs to pay you $500, $800, whatever that amount that you all have deemed is appropriate to cover their room and board. Having that lodging agreement, extremely important. One question kind of in this is, okay, well, that I get asked a lot when we start discussing that lodging agreement is, okay, well, if they're paying me $500 a month now, what happens when I pass? If they're in a group home or they're, in some type of waiver program, what will that cost? And it's typically about 30% of their income received. So that's an easy way for us to kind of budget that going forward. But I always put that in here because a lot of people ask, well, what will they be charged once I'm gone? So now it comes into, okay, well, he's he or she is paying me $500 a month, I don't really want this money. I don't want it to be, you know, I feel like I'm taking money from my child, is what a lot of people will say. Sometimes we need that money because it's expensive supporting them, right? And we use that to pay for other things. So that's what I suggest. Use that money if it's something that you need to supplement for your child. Be careful you're not paying for things that Social Security is supposed to cover, room and board. So if they have special therapies or camps or, you know, something like that that you want to do, you can use that money to also put it in their trust. You can gift money each month back into their trust, and use that maybe potentially to get a life insurance policy that will fund the trust far more than your $500 a month will, right? So for example, I have a family who they receive a payment from their child each month. That money goes from the child to their checking account to the trust, and the trust owns, pays for, and is the beneficiary of a life insurance policy on mom and dad that will fund the trust with $1 million when they pass. So that is a way of taking that, you know, money that you have maximized from SSI or SSDI or the disabled adult child benefit, and using it to help prepare and grow for the future. So I'm already talking about my next slide here. So how do we, you know, once we're gone, it's pretty hard to live off of 914, or let's assume they receive half of ours, $1,500 a month. That's not a lot of money, and we want to supplement. So we need to come up with strategies of how we can fund that trust for them for in the future. Inheritance, whatever's left in our financial plan, what is left of our assets, we will, you know, of course, be able to pass on to our child. And there's a whole nother seminar I can give on, you know, which assets are best to pass on, which can, which shouldn't, all of that. But also life insurance. Those are really the two big ways that we fund a special needs trust. Like I said, the trust can own a policy and pay for a policy and be a beneficiary of that policy. I see we have some questions in the chat. Marilyn, should I stop here or?
Sure. Yes. Thank you for seeing that. Yes, I think let's go ahead with those. Do you want to read them or you want me to?
I got it. I pulled it up here. So Rebecca asked a question about the lodging agreement a couple slides back. Does this lodging agreement have to be something official like a contract, or can I write this on a piece of paper? What is SSA looking for? So it needs to be like a contract, right? It needs to be typed up. It needs to be signed. I don't believe it has to be notarized. It should be dated. But you can create it. You don't have to hire an attorney to go out and get it. There's a few lodging or apartment contracts that you can download online. You know, some of them get really specific with, you know, what the person is expected to do. It really depends on what you want it to say. You know, my lodging agreement with my daughter really spells out what her chores are. But that's more because, you know, that's important for me, that she knows that she has to contribute to the family and to the household. But that's completely, you know, your discretion. You know, I mean, I've seen some that say which rooms they have access to and all that. It's whatever you need it to say, right? But it does need to say when rent is due, who is paying the rent and board, and what it is for. And really just saying it's for room and board is good. I have not heard or had any experience with people having trouble with it, a lodging agreement not, you know, being sufficient. Is a lodging agreement supposed to be in place before applying for SSI? How does the child have ability to pay for it prior to that? So I would say yes, put the lodging agreement in place, the month they turn 18, for example, or the month they graduate high school, however you want to do it. Because if SSDI or SSI, I'm sorry, kicks in and it's retroactive, you may get a larger lump sum payment and then have to figure out how to spend that down quickly so it's not considered an asset. So if you have a lodging agreement and they haven't paid on that lodging agreement in 4 months, you can now have them pay you $2,000 in retroactively for those months they didn't pay. So that's a way of kind of accounting for some of that money. If a person with a disability is working a job, is it better for this person to have my questions are small here. Sorry, just enlarged it. If a person with a disability is working a job, is it better for this person to have a special needs trust or the retirement benefits 401k offered by most employers? So this becomes like kind of the retirement accounts become really one of our stumbling blocks to getting our kids, especially if you have a kid that is higher functioning or is going to be able to work part-time or full-time, and they have access to a retirement plan. That will then be considered an asset. Their retirement plans will be considered an asset and will diminish their ability to get SSI, which then could diminish their ability to get Medicaid, which then means they're working, but they don't have any health insurance if they're working part-time. So now there are some programs Social Security has to help keep Medicaid, but that's like one of those really tricky situations, right? Because we want them to work and be independent as much as possible, but then there's some limitations of the system that kind of holds us back. So depending upon the child and how well they are going to be able to function and what the future's looking like is going to determine if we look at doing the retirement benefits or the special needs trust. I say every kid needs a Roth IRA as soon as they have any form of income, but that makes it difficult for us with our kids. So a lot of times I will have them set up an ABLE account because the ABLE account can, it grows, tax-free, much like the Roth does. And it's their money. So money that they're adding in for retirement or that's coming out of their paycheck is their money. So it would need to go into a first party trust or it would need to go into an ABLE account. So Rebecca, it's really so specific to each family. It's kind of hard to know, right? So especially if that employer is going to match or give money there, then taking the retirement benefits is great. For a lot of families, the kind of the kicker is health insurance. Well, if they take this job and they're working full time and they get health insurance, then that's great, right? But if it's a part-time job and they're not going to have benefits, it becomes more of a sticky situation. So we really have to look at it kind of on a case-by-case basis to see which is better. Just to recap here, the funding strategies, we talked about inheritance, we talked about life insurance. And I have hybrid on annuities on here because of the current interest rate market. Annuities are becoming more popular. And it is also a great way if there is money in a trust. So say grandma and grandpa pass away and they leave money to that family or that child's special needs trust. We can do an annuity based off of the disabled child. So the trust owns and benefits from the annuity, but it's annuitized over the life of the child. So then that way we can guarantee a certain income stream coming into the trust, not to the child, income into the trust every year that the trust can then use to supplement the needs of the disabled adult child. So we can use hybrid annuities. That's what they call it. It's really just fancy structuring of an annuity to make sure that that money in the trust doesn't run out. So we have lots of different strategies we can apply once there's money in a trust as well. Why is it not advancing? There we go. I've kind of talked a little bit about trusts right now, and I just want to do a real quick trust 101 definition. First party trusts, important thing to remember is it's their money. So money that came to them in a lawsuit, money that they've earned at work, money that was given directly to them and not to their trust. First party trusts, subject to Medicaid repayment. Third party trust is money family has put into the trust. It is not their money. It is money that has come from grandma, mom, dad, anybody who wanted to give money to this child. The third party trusts are not subject to Medicaid repayment. So we always want to spend down first party trust prior to third party trusts. Both of these trusts, first party and third party trusts, can be pooled trusts or personally managed. So you can establish a trust with the ARC of Northern Virginia, for example, where they manage and distribute those funds for you. You can set up a trust with an attorney that maybe you are the trustee for, and you have appointed a sibling or an aunt or uncle or somebody to be the trustee should something happen to you. You can also then say, I want this to roll over into a pooled trust once I pass. Lots of things, but the personally managed, if there's going to be money in it while you are alive, it is sometimes easier to do. I have a lot of families with both pooled trusts and personally managed. ABLE accounts are also a great tool in your toolbox, not a replacement for establishing a trust, because once we hit $100,000 in that ABLE account, it would become an issue for Social Security and be considered an asset. So ABLE accounts are great ways to replace retirement, like we were talking there, Rebecca. If you want your child to have a savings program, but we don't want to stick it in a Roth right now because that'll impact their benefits, sticking it in an ABLE is good. So there's there and also the ABLE is going to have a higher amount that they can put in than a Roth. So it's a good tool to have in your toolbox. ABLE accounts can be done through a financial advisor such as myself if the primary goal is investing in long-term growth. If it's more, we want to have a debit card on this so that our adult disabled child can utilize it, then I suggest usually going through the Virginia 529, which is Virginia ABLE. They're the same platform. One thing I'm going to get to the chat question here right after this, but the last thing I have on here is retirement accounts. And the reason here that I mention this is if you have money left in your estate, particularly if it's a retirement account, for tax purposes, we want to look at how is the best way to liquidate that. That may be an asset that goes to your special needs trust versus money that's, not retirement money, because the Secure Act has been fixed and money that is left to a supplemental or special needs trust can be stretched over the disabled person's lifetime. If I leave that money to a non-disabled child, they have to liquidate that account in 10 years. If that happens during their 40s, 50s, when they're at their highest earning years, that could mean there's a lot bigger tax drag on those retirement accounts. So we want to do some tax planning around what accounts we leave and how we liquidate those. Okay, let me pull up this chat question here. Is there any expectation that the Able Max account will go up? I have not seen talk on that or legislation here in Virginia requesting that go up. I've seen more kind of push in what to do with, you know, kind of like that retirement problem I was talking about, you know, helping people work and still maintain some of those benefits, as well as increasing the asset limit, because right now for Social Security and Medicaid, it's $2,000 in assets, which is not a lot of money. So how can you save for a new car? How can you save for an emergency like your refrigerator breaking, when most refrigerators are going to be over $1,000? You know, there's a lot of talk in trying to fix those. I have not heard anything about that specific claim line item on Able accounts. I would say
the annual amount has gone up fairly regularly, right? It started at like 14,000, 15,000.
Your contribution amounts, yeah, that has gone up. Yes, so it is tied to the gifting amount. So in previous years, it was always you can give somebody $15,000 a year without having to do tax reporting, right? Now that gifting amount is 17,000. So that Able contribution limit is tied to that. So as that goes up with inflation, the contribution amount can go up to inflation as well. Also, if their income is at or below the poverty level, they can contributions can be made to the Able account equal to the poverty limit, which right now is just shy of 13,000 here in Virginia. So there is another way to kind of add a little bit more, but those contributions have to come from the individual. So, you know, we have money that we receive in SSI or SSDI that we are not spending. Then the rep payee account could transfer that money into an Able to offset that poverty amount, even if mom and dad have put in 17,000 for the Able account, right? So that's the one way to kind of get above that $17,000 limit, but that limit will continue to increase because it's by law tied to inflation. So it's just the max amount. I haven't seen any talk about changing that. Let me see. So that was, you know, kind of where I like to always end with a quote. Long-term thinking and planning enhances our short-term decision making. Making sure you have a plan for your life in your hand, and that includes a financial plan and your overall mission. So it's really hard to get where we want to go if we don't have a plan, right? So if we know where we want to go long-term, we're better able to make those short-term decisions that help us achieve that. So that is my 2 cents on planning, estate planning, financial planning, all of it together. Here's my contact information as well. I will send out, I'll send to Marilyn the slide deck so that you have that for your reference. And also just to know, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. I always give a free consultation to anyone who has questions that have attended my seminars. But we do still have a little bit more time, Marilyn, I believe. Yeah. If you all have questions now, I'd be glad to help in any way.